Hi, so in this video I'm going to talk a little bit about how I think MBTI functions might manifest in music, and I'm going to specifically be talking about the perceiving functions, so SI and SE and NI and NE, and how those kind of, I think, pop up in music. And this is just going to be a couple things that really stick out to me, I think, and I could be entirely wrong, and if I am, please let me know. So it's not going to be a whole discussion on it, it's just going to be a couple kind of distinctions, I think, that are kind of easy to see, in my opinion. And it should also be noted that I don't think that musicians should be typed entirely based on the lyrics that they write. I think that can be inaccurate for a number of reasons, because they will often write in character or just from another person's perspective, and in some cases, the person singing the song might not even be the primary songwriter. So it's just going to be how I think these functions kind of show up in music sometimes, and I'm going to focus on pop and rock examples because those are the things I'm most familiar with, and I'm going to try to use examples that are, I think, mainstream enough, and I will link corresponding videos to the songs that I talk about. So, in any case, in general, I think that the SINE function pair, when it comes to lyrics, it's a lot more detail oriented, and so they'll use a lot more specific language, and so it's usually more focused on like painting the exact picture that they want the listener to hear and to feel, and there's a little bit less room for ambiguity in these things. There's specific detailed language, and yeah, they have a specific picture that they want to paint for the listeners. Whereas the SENI cognitive function pair, it's more broad in scope, and it gives people the general idea, I think, and it operates more with show, don't tell, and it leaves more room for like the listener coming away with their own interpretation of it. And yeah, and one thing that I've noticed about the SE and I pairing in particular is that they or more often overtly reference archetypes and kind of and the elemental archetypes like water and fire and earth and wind, and they'll just overtly talk about this, and that doesn't necessarily, I don't think, show up as often with the SINE function pairs, and sometimes that'll be the basis for the entire song. For example, you have Firework by Katy Perry and Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. I mean, those are kind of very, I think, archetypal images, and kind of like primeval things, I guess. And another kind of interesting thing to note is that I think the SE and I pairing, they use religious metaphors for kind of sensual and or sexual things, and this shows up a lot, I think, and it's just an interesting thing. For example, you have God is a Woman by Ariana Grande, and Like a Prayer by Madonna, which it's not about God or Jesus or anything like that. As a sidebar, you can go watch her performance of that song from the 2019 Eurovision Song Competition, and it's just kind of a complete occult ritual, in my opinion, and the comments say as much as well. Side issue. And you also have Judas by Lady Gaga and Take Me to Church by Hozier. I think that's how you say his name. Could be wrong. But in any case, all these songs use kind of religious imagery as a stand-in just for like human connection and stuff. A very intimate human connection. And I think that's interesting because I don't think that shows up as much with people who are SINE or an SINE type songs. And a good example of a songwriter who does use those functions is Taylor Swift, who I'm not super familiar with her work, but I know that she's very, like, very detailed in her songwriting, and she's very particular about the lyrics that she uses, and so she gives very detailed storytelling and lyrics, and very purposeful in what she includes in her songs and what she wants the listener to feel and see. And she, in a way, I think she's kind of created her own mythology within her songs, especially with her two most recent albums. There's this whole world that I guess she's created for her fans with those two albums in particular, which is interesting. And she's very good at writing songs like this, and women in particular really connect with it, and it's either because they've had a similar experience to what she's writing about, or it's this kind of, you know, common fantasy or myth for women to know about. And so she kind of taps into that, and it's between SINE and SENI, it's like the SENI function is taking the universal and making it personal, whereas SINE is taking the personal and making it universal. And I think that whatever you think about Bono and his antics and whatever, but I think that U2, some of their songs, they really tap in to the universal, and I think that it's kind of like tapping into the core feelings of the universe and putting it into a song. And I think that's why so many of their songs connect with people, is because they're tapping into that. And Bono's an ENFJ, and so he does use SENI. And my last thing that I'm kind of going to talk about, because I feel like this is going to be really long, is that I think that the NESI functions are more likely to overtly reference literature. And an example of this that I really like is the Resistance album by Muse, which is kind of based on 1984, especially the song Resistance, but it just kind of takes that as a starting point, especially song Resistance, which is a love story about Winston and Julia in the midst of a totalitarian regime where human connection is forbidden. It takes that as a starting point and kind of extrapolates on that, and you get songs about MK Ultra, which it's called that. There's no ambiguity to that. And songs that kind of talk about the 1% of the 1% controlling things, the New World Order, and all of this. And so they use that as a starting point to go off on other ideas. And that's what SINE is expansion of ideas versus, you know, taking this whole thing and condensing it into the one thing. And another example of that, of another band that I think have kind of created their own mythology, not as extensively as Taylor Swift has, but you have the Killers, and they have their songs Mr. Brightside, which everybody knows, but they also have its counterpart, which is called Miss Atomic Bomb, and they've kind of created their own mythology within those two songs. Miss Atomic Bomb came out after, and it references the previous Mr. Brightside in the lyrics and in certain parts of the music. And so they've created their own mythology around it. So yeah, that's kind of a very brief discussion of this, and I will try to link everything that I talked about below. So if you're not familiar, you can look at it if you want. And if you think I'm completely off base and just not making any sense, please let me know. But thank you very much for watching, and I hope that you're having a good day. Bye.